Picture a young man in the fall of 2018, carrying boxes up the stairs of a modest pre-walk-up in Astoria, Queens. He's 27, he makes about $40,000 a year as a foreclosure representative housing counselor, helping people fight to keep a roof over their heads. The apartment is small, one bedroom, wooden floors, a windowed kitchen, the neighbors you can hear through the walls. And the rent is about $2,300 a month. A number that in New York City for a stabilized one bedroom in a trendy neighborhood is a genuine break. He didn't grow up needing breaks. His mother is an internationally acclaimed filmmaker. His father is a tenured professor at Columbia. But this apartment becomes the backdrop of something bigger. Over the next 7 years, this man builds an entire political identity around a single word: affordability. He runs for state assembly on it. Then he runs for mayor on it. He wins, promising 2 million renters that he will freeze the rent and end the impossible math of living in the city. And then, in December of 2025, fresh off the biggest victory of his life, he announces he's moving out, not to another apartment, no, to a mansion. Who am I talking about? Zoran Mamdani. And here's the part that turned his old apartment into a headline. So within weeks of him leaving, the same modest one bedroom, the symbol of his whole affordability message, got relisted for the next tenant at $3,100 a month, $800 more, a 35% jump, still technically rent stabilized. But the most damning thing about this story isn't the $800. It's something he said years ago about his exact apartment. And once you hear it, you won't be able to unhear it. Because if you rent anywhere in America, the machinery underneath this story is already grinding towards your city. So let's pick it up the day the listing went live. So here's what happened next. The man who spent a campaign telling New Yorkers that the rent was crushing them, he would freeze it, that grocery stores, shopping, and rent shouldn't feel like an unsolvable equation. That man picks up his $2,300 apartment, heads for Gracie Mansion, the $1,799 federal-style estate on East River where New York mayors traditionally live. He says the move is about his family's safety and about focusing on the agenda. Fine, reasonable. But the apartment he left behind didn't stay $2,300. $2,300. Oh no. According to the New York Post, the unit quietly attracted interest for a few weeks and then landed on the market at $3,100 a month for whoever comes next. That's an extra $800. That's a 35% increase on the same floors, the same walls, the same windowed kitchen he said he'd miss cooking dinner in. And here's the detail that stops people. The apartment is still rent stabilized. Stabilized. The exact category of housing the mayor swore to protect, swore to freeze, swore to make affordable. And the moment he vacated one of those units, the price for the next New Yorker leaped by more than a third. Now you might be thinking, how does a stabilized apartment jump 35% overnight? That's the right question, and the answer is the thread that unravels everything. Because that $2,300 he paid was never the real number. It was a discount. It was a special rate. And the reason it could exist and the reason it could vanish the second he left comes down to something he never had to explain on a debate stage. Think about what this looks like to an ordinary renter in Queens. You hear a politician promise to freeze the rent. You vote for him. You believe him. And then you watch his own apartment, the one he built his brand on, become $800 more expensive for someone exactly like you. The instant it's convenient for him just to leave, he gets the mansion. You get the listing. That's not even the worst part, because while everyone was fixated on the $800 jump, almost nobody asked the more important question: how is he paying so little in the first place? And the answer pulls in his income, his family, and a rival who tried to warn New Yorkers about exactly this months before anyone was listening. Here's how he was paying so little. It's a thing called preferential rent. See, in New York, a rent-stabilized apartment has a legal maximum that the registered rent the landlord is allowed to charge. But a landlord can choose to charge less than that maximum, called a discounted preferential rate. often to attract a tenant in the softer market. Mamdani's legal max was just over $3,000. He was paying around $2,300. The gap, that roughly $800 discount, is the gap that reappeared the moment he moved out. Now, when a preferential rent tenant leaves, the landlord can reset the legal rent for the next person. So the 35% jump isn't a glitch, it's a system working exactly as it's written. He simply happened to be the one enjoying just the lower number. Now layer in who he is. When he moved back in 2018, he was earning about $47,000. But by the time he left, he'd spent years as a state assemblyman, earning roughly $142,000 a year, while still holding that below market stabilized one bedroom. And remember the family. His mother is the filmmaker Mira Nair. His father is a tenured Columbia professor. This was never a story about a man with no other options, which is precisely the argument his rival Andrew Cuomo tried to make during the campaign. Cuomo went after Mamdani's living situation, directly claiming a well-off candidate was occupying a regulated apartment that could have gone to a family with far less. He even floated legislation he called "It's Zoran's Law" to put income limits on who can hold rent-stabilized units. And at the time, a lot of people waved it off as a political jab. But sit with the picture for a second. A six-figure assemblyman from a prominent family holding a discounted, stabilized apartment while running to be the next champion of New York. Who can't get one? You don't have to hate the man to see why this just lands wrong. And here's where it stops being about one apartment. Because the same person standing on stage promising to fix the housing market had already years earlier pushed a policy according to the people who track these listings, help make the market worse for everyone. Hunting for a place right now, wait until you see what happens to the listings. Here it is, the peak of this whole thing. As a state assemblyman, Mamdani was a vocal backer of what became the Fair Act, New York's ban on forcing renters to pay the broker's fee. The one that used to add thousands of dollars up front just to sign a lease. On its face, it sounds exactly like the kind of relief a renter wants. The fee was brutal. Banning it polled well. It took effect June of 2025. But here's what the data showed afterwards. See, according to an analysis by a real estate firm, Urban Digs, the number of new listings on Real Estate Board, main listing service, dropped by 77% after that law kicked in. 77% brokers, instead of eating the fee, increasingly pulled their listings off market, handling them quietly outside the public system to sidestep the new rules. And critics point out the fee didn't disappear so much as it got baked directly into the monthly rent. The relief had a backfire built into it. Now connect that to the apartment we started with. How was Mamdani's own former unit being leased out off market? The exact workaround that exploded under the very law he championed, the policy he pushed to help renters, help push listings into the shadows. And then his own apartment slipped through the same shadow door at $3,100 a month. And his signature promise? The big one. Freeze the rent for 2 million people. Stabilize tenants. He moved fast on. He appointed a new majority to Rent Guidelines Board, the panel that sets how much stabilized rents can rise. And this was supposed to be an easy win. The cornerstone, but in its first major vote in May of 2026, that board, his board, didn't freeze anything. It left rent increase on the table. 0 to 2%. On 1-year leases, 0 to 4% on 2-year leases. The actual freeze proposal voted down. So the promise to freeze rent didn't freeze rent. The policy to help renters thinned out. And listings and the affordable apartment got less affordable the second he left it. Which brings us to the part they really don't want getting out. Because the sharpest words about all of this didn't come from a Republican. No, not at all. They came from a Democrat, and his name is Robert Holden, a city councilman from Queens, one of the most conservative Democrats in the city government. Not a Republican operative, no. So not a Fox News panelist, a member of Mamdani's own party, representing the same borough Mamdani built his career in. And here's what Holden said about the apartment situation. This is exactly what New Yorkers are sick of. Politicians who benefit from housing arrangements while pushing policies that make rents higher and listings disappear for everyone else. Read that again, because a Democrat just laid out the entire pattern in one sentence. Benefit personally, push policies that raise costs, and let everyone else absorb the damage. He wasn't even the only one in the room. Republican Council Minority Leader Jonah Ariola put it bluntly, calling it a Nepo baby, leaving an undermarket apartment for a mansion while the price gets jacked up for the next guy. But it's Holden, the Democrat, whose words actually cut, because he can't be dismissed as partisan noise. And now it puts all three pieces together, because they're not three stories, they're one. Piece one, the affordability champion. Personally enjoyed a below-market apartment for 7 years on a 6-figure salary. Piece two, broker fee law he backed coincided with the listings collapsing 77% and going off-market, including his own. Piece three, the rent freeze he made, the heart of the campaign, his campaign, got left on the table by the very board he stacked to deliver it. That is the part that should generally bother you. Because no matter how you vote, because the people who can least afford the gap between the promise and the result are the ones now staring at a $3,100 listing or scrolling a rental market with 3/4 fewer public listings than before, wondering where the affordability went. So when you put all this together, there's really only one conclusion, and it's the one they've been hoping. The one they've been hoping you wouldn't reach. Because there's a single sentence this man wrote years ago about the exact apartment that turns the whole story inside out. And here it is, the part they've been hoping you'd never put together. Back in November of 2019, long before any of this, Zoran Mamdani posted something online about his own apartment. The same Astoria one-bedroom. He wrote, "Today, our one-bedroom rent-stabilized apartment in Astoria costs $2,000 a month. In 1984, the same apartment cost $290.60 a month. What is this, if not theft?" Theft. That's the word he used. He looked at the rising rent, the exact unit, and called it theft. And now, he's the one walking out the door, leaving behind the apartment that just jumped $800 for the next New Yorker who needs it by his own 2019 definition. What exactly is that? And here's the pattern named plainly. A man who builds a movement on affordability while personally holding a discounted apartment, he champions a law that coincides with listings vanishing. He stacks a board to freeze rent, and the freeze doesn't come. And the very increase he once called theft is now the increased departure set in motion. None of these facts come from his opponents. They come from the New York Post, from real estate data firms, from a Democrat in his own party, from his own keyboard in 2019. You now understand this story better than most people who only ever see the headline. And the headline misses the point completely. This point isn't one apartment. It's distance between the people, what people are promised, and what actually shows up in the rent. Remember that 27-year-old carrying boxes up the stairs of a modest Astoria walk-up, paying $2,300 a month, building his career on the word affordability? Well, he got the mansion. The next person who wants that kitchen pays $3,100. That's the whole story in 2 numbers. The pattern promise. Policy exemption isn't staying in New York. It's coming to a city near you. So guys, subscribe, turn on that bell so you catch the next breakdown the moment it drops. And drop a comment. What was the moment in this video where it clicked for you?